so gray that it's gonna look like muddy, no, you know, sponsorships. Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the new Colourpop Stone Cold Fox eyeshadow palette. So this came out in late October. This is from a brand called Colourpop. If you're not familiar with the brand, it is a drugstore priced brand with really, really good quality products. I feel, in my opinion, that these products are on the high-end, you know, spectrum for quality, but they definitely are more reasonably priced than most high-end brands. So this palette is the Stone Cold Fox eyeshadow palette. It is the 30 pan palette that is cool tone. This retails for $34 US. Quality of their eyeshadow is so incredible. I cannot, you know, rave on enough. By the way, this video is not sponsored. I have no, you know, sponsorships or affiliate links. Their eyeshadow really is incredible, and I'm pumped to try this one. This is what the palette looks like. It is very cool toned, but you will notice that some of the shades in here have a tiny bit of warmth in them, which is actually really nice because it makes it a bit more of a neutral palette. I think that it is more, you know, leaning on the cool side 100%. If you like warm eyeshadow, you're definitely not going to get what you're looking for in this palette. But if you like, you know, neutral to cool, like you like cool shadows, but you don't want like a gray look or like a super cool look all the time, I think you're still going to enjoy this. So I think that the color scheme of this is really nice. I like that there's just a couple pops of not warm, but neutral. Like it's neutral, so it has enough warmth that it's not gonna look gray. And I do think that even the really cool toned shades, like You Rock, it's not so gray that it's gonna look like muddy. Sometimes, you know, gray taupes and beiges and all of that can look a little bit too dull. So I think from, you know, swatching a couple shades, I think it's a very well laid out palette, and I think that the color scheme is really beautiful. So next I'm gonna play around with the palette. I'm gonna talk you through a look. We're gonna go really, you know, everyday, because I feel like this palette is an everyday palette. Yes, you can go down to these lower lines and create some really smoky, more sultry, more dramatic looks, but I think looking at the grand scheme of it, whoever's buying this palette, I mean, I'm sure you're probably going to be using this more on an everyday rather than a smoky more frequently. So I'm going to be doing an everyday look with this. I am also going to talk about the Bare Necessities palette. Obviously, I'm not here to, you know, rave on about this. I do really like this palette. The one thing is, when I first looked at this palette online, I thought, do I not have a palette quite similar? So I just wanted to show you guys up close. These are the two palettes next to each other. Number one, I want to note the actual outer packaging, and again, don't judge me, this one's a little bit messy, is very similar. This one is, they're both kind of, how would you describe that? Like almost snake skin. Like they're not exactly the same, but they're very similar even in packaging. And then when you take a look at the actual shades and even the layout of the colors, I think it is a little bit similar. If you already have the Bare Necessities palette and are loving it, I don't think you need the Stone Cold Fox palette. That being said, this one is a lot warmer. I believe that this is like the warmer version of Stone Cold Fox. So if you have this and you maybe feel like I would prefer it to be a little bit more cool toned, I think you would love this one. It would probably be worth the purchase because you may enjoy this more. If you have this, you like it, you don't feel like you need a whole 30 pan palette with the same kind of idea, the same kind of color scheme, but just cooler toned, I don't think you need both. I just wanted to put that out there. There's not very many shades in the palettes that are identical. So if you have both, or if you're thinking of getting both, you can have both. And I think you can create very different looks because one is more warm and one is more cool. I think both are pretty neutral in terms of color story, like browns and, you know, different shades of brown, black, some different, you know, shades of metallic. I think the ideas are pretty much identical, but as I said, different tones, much more warm. And when I first started using this, I thought this was a pretty neutral palette, but when you compare it to the Stone Cold Fox, you see so much warmth in this. So That's what I just wanted to point out, is they're very, very, very similar. I don't think you need both, but if you want this color story in warm and cool, that would be when you would kind of want to get both. If you are looking for a good everyday neutral color story, but you only want one, you need to kind of figure out, do you want cool toned or warm? You need to kind of figure out what is your preference, what looks better on your skin tone. But I did want to bring that up because some of you may be confused, like, is this the same palette or what? Because I at first had kind of that thought. I thought, is like, are we doing this all over again? Because like I already loved my Bare Necessities, but I love me a good cool tone. So let's dive in. And I've already prepped with MAC Paint Pot, so we're gonna just dive in and do a good everyday look. Let's do Stranger here. It's a pretty neutral shade actually. It has a little bit of warmth in it. I'm gonna take my Luxie 205 Tapered Blending and I'm gonna pop it right in the crease and just start kind of going back and forth in the crease. I'm not gonna bring it up. You can kind of do circular motions. This is a very light shade. I'm starting off light and then we're going to build it up in the crease a little bit. So once you have it laid out in that crease, I'm then going to, with no extra product, you can even kind of wipe it on the back of your hand. Just do little circular motions to kind of blend that shade out. We're barely even doing, you know, much right now because this is almost like the transition shade, and again with no extra product, just working it up. So you can kind of see a little bit of a difference. The crease looks a little bit more carved out here, but barely noticeable. That's the point of this shade, is just barely there, but it's gonna play a part in the next step. So now I'm going to take my MAC 224S. It's just a little bit more precise. It's tapered, so it still has some, you know, blending abilities. It's not like a pencil brush. So now we're going to get a little bit darker, and I'm gonna go into Bold Type. It's a bit more of a stony shade, a little bit more cool toned. Like, they kick up a lot of product, the mattes especially, so really be tapping off your excess. But if you're doing that, then you should be okay with fallout. Put it in the same place, but be even more precise. You don't want to move it up any higher than this. You just want to stay in the crease. So as you can see, it's definitely carving out that crease a lot more now that we have that dark shade. Just gonna build it up a little bit more. So now what we're going to do is just take that last brush and blend it out. I'm not gonna add any more product because I don't want to bring it up any higher, but it'll have a little bit of that last shade, so it's going to help blend into the last shade. Now what we're going to do is take that brush, kind of do the same thing, wipe off the excess, and just little circular motions on the edge of where we just placed it. We're not bringing it up any higher. Like, we don't want to add any product, we just want to blend that edge out. So do you see how it kind of connected the two shades? And then I personally like to kind of sweep it out the side. I like that kind of snatched look. If you like a more rounded look, then you could have just left it how I had it, but I'm going to kind of, similar, I guess, to the fox eye, and you could definitely do a fox eye with this. Like, this palette would be perfect for the fox eye. So if you're like down for that fox eye, this is the palette for that. If you want to do a fox eye every day, I would grab this palette. And it's kind of a bit of a back and forth, so now I'm going to reinforce that shade one more time, because now that they're blended together, we want to just reinforce that crease a little bit further. And that's pretty much the crease. Now, this is a pretty basic everyday look. You could go a little bit more dramatic, but I don't do enough of these looks, so I wanted to really walk you through a good everyday look with this palette, because I think it's like the perfect palette for an everyday look. So for lid, basically this is where you kind of have to choose what you want to do. Do you want a metallic? And if you want a metallic, like how metallic do you want to go type idea? There's so many different options, or you could just leave it like this, or you could do a matte, like you could do that nice bright white. You could do even just like a slight bit lighter than your transition shade to kind of just have something on the lid. So that's kind of where I would say it'd be up to you. I like metallic. So if you don't like metallic, I would stick with mattes. So I'm actually gonna use a brush though for metallic because it's not gonna be as intense. I'm gonna go into Baby Doll. So the reason I'm going into this one is it's not too bright like that silver. It's not too cool toned like the silver. It's not too dark. Like I want it to contrast, but I kind of want it to still just blend in and just have a bit of like a gleam. So as you can see, it's bright. It's definitely brighter. It's gonna add some contrast to the crease, but it's going to still be like kind of natural. Then once I have put that on, one last time, I like to go in with my crease shade, which was the bold type, like the darker one, and just reinforce, like just so that we're not having a overlap of the metallic onto the crease, because when you have that, it really kind of dulls it down. So what I want is to really brighten up the inner corner, but this magnetic moon is a little bit too silver for this look. So I'm gonna take it on a brush and just pat the excess on the back of my hand and then just blend it into the existing metallic. So that way it's a little bit more natural, but still brighter than the one we laid on the lid. And by blending it into the lid, blends them together so there's like a flow, not just like the lid metallic and then the inner corner metallic. I'm gonna also take the same shade, still tapping the excess on the back of my hand, into the brow bone. And I'm gonna take that brush that I used to blend out, and I'm gonna go along that edge so that there is the same kind of effect, just a nice transition into the brow bone shade, so we don't have just like a swipe of metallic. You can kind of see the line in between. You know, even sometimes a highlight on your cheek, sometimes it's almost too pigmented, or whatever the issue may be, you see like almost a line on your cheek. You want to blend those edges out. We're doing the same here on the brow. I'm gonna take my JH47 and I'm going to go into Cult Classic. It is a really dark brown, quite a bit darker than the shade we used in the crease. So we're gonna actually use that to line the lower lash line. And this brush is so precise. I'm only gonna go halfway, and then when I get to halfway, I'm gonna make sure I have none of the excess on there. And I'm just going to kind of pull it in, so we blend that in, and then it has a transition as well, so it softens as it goes in. And then I like to just go along the edge to kind of soften that edge. I'm then going to take the same brush, connect this up to the lid, and kind of create a bit of a wing. Connect that and kind of fill that in, but I don't want it to be really dramatic and really dark and like not like a black liner. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go to about halfway, pull that shade so that it does the same thing as I did on the bottom lash line. And I'm just gonna go along the edge of this wing just to soften it a little bit, because I just want it to have a bit of a softened edge rather than a really like stark line, if that makes sense. I'm then going to take my blending brush with a bit of this shade that I used to blend out the top, and I'm going to kind of smoke out the bottom a little bit. It's such a light shade that it's not really going to make the biggest difference, just like it didn't make the you know, the biggest difference on the top, but it's enough to really give it a good softened blended look, and that's basically what we're going for. So that is the finished eyeshadow look. It's really simple. That's the look for today. I'm just gonna go ahead and finish up, and then I'm gonna come back and finish talking about the palette, and then we'll have the swatches. Okay, so this is the final look. I'm really happy with this palette. I think it's super valuable for a palette to have a really nice, deep, rich black. You can create really, really nice liners with, you know, black powder. You can also use a lot of these browns for your brows. This is a very, very good palette. Final opinion, absolutely in love with this. Definite recommend. One of my favorite everyday palettes that I have reviewed. I think this is going to be a staple in my collection now, and I think that it would be very valuable in yours if you are a fan of cool toned shades, because obviously it is majority cool toned. I will have it linked below. I will also link the Bare Necessities one if you are more interested in warm tones. It's definitely a more warm toned palette, but similar color scheme. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel, ring the bell. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.